get to the Roosters versus Dolphins, eh?
That's going to be an absolute cracker later on. But it was a bit of a cracker last night as well. Again, strange. I'll keep saying it. Strange old game. The Roosters, a little bit like the Cowboys, I would have thought, will walk away very happy with the 2 points. But the one thing you can probably bet your bottom dollar on it is Robbo not being overly enamoured with the 34 points they leaked to the Dolphins.
Yeah, and we've got some audio from Trent Robinson a little bit later. One of the parts that I found really entertaining is he said that he left the tackling in Sydney. But I've got to give Roosters more credit in this sense. Dolphins are a better team than the Tigers.
Yep.
They've got more talent. They've got more to play for. They had a full 13. And, when I don't know, I've been... Get away from the Roosters a little bit onto the Dolphins. Like Hammer, I still think Hammer is one of the more underrated outside backs in the game, and the way he's able to come up with little moments in game. Everyone always thinks about the tries and all that sort of stuff. Some of the big moments that he comes up with defensively as well is super underrated. This is a good win for the Roosters.
Yep.
You go away, you go over to Perth. Let's start with that, actually. Perth, they have the West Coast Eagles playing last night as well.
Which I didn't realise until after the fact.
Same time,
yeah.
40,000 for the AFL, 20,000 for the Rugby League. That is a great advertisement for the game in Perth right now. And with those sorts of numbers, I am very confident a Perth team is going to be successful.
And we saw a few signs in the crowd. From the punters over there, just almost demanding the NRL to get a team over there. Which it's almost a no-brainer. It'll definitely work. I think,
it's going over. It's going to happen, right? And I'm all for it. I was a little bit hesitant a couple of years ago, but off the back of an Origin series there, one game from the Origin series a couple of years ago that went really well.
Yep.
And then seeing the fans turn up to a Roosters versus Dolphins game as well. Sammy Walker, he's the... If the Roosters are going to do anything, with as many good players as they've got in their team, champion players that have won competitions, who are at the back end of their career, and there are a couple of last dance teams that they can go with regards to some of those players, man, Sammy Walker is the key.
If you flick that game on, if you've just woken up from a coma of 20 years and you just flick that game on by accident, you're dead set to think you were still in the 90s. The way he plays.
He's got a bit of Alfie about him, mate.
So much Alfie about him.
Yeah.
It's probably the most... one of the most cliched sayings when talking about players of his sort of type, but he just plays one in front of him. And it is so true. Like, he can obviously play to great structure. And one thing I want to ask you about is, like, how do you tell him to go out and play? Is it just whatever you see in front of you, just do it? Because it felt like at some times he got those 2 tries from chip and chase, and he might have just forced the hand a little bit of trying to do something really special. Do you take that with the absolute genius, or do you try and find a happy medium?
That's what they've been struggling with for a couple of years, and I think they're finding their sweet spot with it. I think having a guy like Cooper Cronk on the staff, who is the polar opposite to him.
So he's still getting paid there, is he?
There's pros and cons to that, right? Because there is parts of Cooper's game that he needs to implement, and if you look at the Manly game and you look at parts of this game where he comes up with brilliance, and the reason potentially why Roosters aren't suffocating teams off the back of it is his inability to then get into kick to corners, play the high percentage plays. But I don't know. It's a very tough one. I think going back to the start of the year, where I really believe, and I've got no inside info on this at all, I reckon there was a conversation not only between him and Robbo. Luke Keary was involved, James Tedesco was involved, and the keys were handed to Sammy. And in a way where it's like, in my opinion, it looks like it's gone from a 50-50 split between him and Keary, which wasn't working in my opinion. Or it wasn't working as successfully as they were hoping for. To basically go on, Sammy, like, this is your team in big moments in the crucial parts of the field. You take over, you come up with something, and you got to give credit to Luke Keary, who has won 3 grand finals.
Yep.
Been a big part of this club for a while. In my opinion, he's taken a step back and let Sammy, who is well and truly the future, they're talking about re-signing him on big money and getting that done before November 1st so he doesn't become available to anyone else. If you look at some of the young players in the competition, the money that's getting thrown their way. And again, like I said, it shows a lot of humility from Kez and even ever so slightly from Teddy as well to make sure to give the keys to Sammy and let him play with that freedom. But again, going back to the point now where that's where they have moments of inconsistency and they're a little bit up and down and not like the Roosters of old that won back-to-back championships in 18 and 19 by just grinding teams down and playing the power game through them.
So he scored a double last night, Sammy Walker, but kicked a lazy 8 from 8. His goal kicking has gone to another level as well.
Huge improvement.
Also won the Arthur Beetson Legacy Medal for Player of the Match. An absolute lay down for Player of the Match there. But let's hear from Roosters coach Trent Robinson on Sam Walker last night.
Most Thursdays at training, I would answer that. That's what it's not. It's pretty common. His eyes are really clear on any mistakes from an opposition and their defensive line org. And he's in a really good space. He's really clear on his footy, and he deserved to be best player on the field tonight and get those rewards, both with the ball, with kicking, and also defensively as well.
There you go. Robbo won the little chip and chase there from Sammy Walker. And probably a little bit of the fair talking point out of the game is how good Sammy Walker is. But in the end, it was probably a really tough win for the Roosters. They lost Dom Young after about half an hour, I think, or around half time. Don't quote me on when it was, but Lindsay Collins also went off nice and early for a head knock. They actually lost him and Radley.
Together.
It was a clash of heads. Imagine them two heads going together. Holy hell. Nat Butcher as well sustained an injury late. So
rib injury. Joe Manu, obviously doesn't look 100% with that hand. That's nowhere near 100% fully fit as well. So, very big win for the Roosters. I'm more probably impressed with this win than I was last week against the Manly Seagulls when I wanted them to go on with it. But I just listened, some of the wording there, that Trent Robinson, I pay attention to clearing his role. Those are the sorts of things I'm talking about with regards to Robbo. And in my opinion, the way that they've changed and tweaked, who has more of a say, who has more of a role in this team moving forward.
Good text here from Cam just on that man Sam Walker. The Roosters' title hope hinge on Sam Walker being effective against teams like Melbourne and Penrith who give you nothing. I think he's still 1 to 2 seasons away from being a halfback that can win a premiership. Probably fair enough.
That's a fair comment.
It's the same with all gun playmakers that come through. And doubt's not the right word, but you really have to do it on the biggest of the stages before everyone gives them that stamp of approval and they can march on. But he's definitely got it in him. It's a case of when, not if, for Sam Walker, and it may well be this year. Yeah, look,
and he's correct in saying that they're probably going to have to come up against Melbourne or Penrith and potentially both. If they can avoid one of them in some way and end up on the other side of not playing either both of them in the final series, then that gives them a lot better chance because they've got this big hangover from all the past games playing them and not being successful. So that'll be crucial. But he hasn't proved it yet because he hasn't been given the opportunity. They haven't played in
call as well. Yeah,
he hasn't played in a big game, but he's the sort of player. I'm telling you, if he come up with a big play or a couple of sneaky big plays in a grand final or a preliminary final or a first week 1 of finals against a big team and got a win, it wouldn't surprise me.
Week 1 finals is big, right?
Yep.
Because if you get that win, you push the Panthers or the Storm. Let's say they're 2v3, right? Roosters and whoever doesn't win the minor premiership. You win that game as a Roosters fan, you go to the other side and you send
huge
the Storm or the Panthers to either the Panthers or the Storm.
Huge.
So that week 1 game for the Roosters, that's got to be, look, we're going to have to go to Penrith or go to Melbourne. We've got to win that game because that's our route to the grand final.
Can anyone win it outside of those three?
No.
Scope?
No. And that's, it is what it is.
Yeah. That's the game, right?
That's the game.
That's the crucial game.
Yeah.
Because
that's huge, Brooksy.
Yeah, because that's why minor premiership's not necessarily the best because you got that game potential prelim that's like.
You know what? And I'm telling you, Robbo would have looked at this as well. And now that you've brought it up, it makes so much more sense. The Roosters game against Melbourne Storm when I reckon there was a real opportunity to rest guys like Angus Crichton in that game and a few other guys that have been a bit banged up. Connor Watson would have been okay coming out of coming off the bench during that series. But Angus Crichton specifically looked like he needed a spell. They really wanted to win that game. I reckon it was huge because you start talking about that first week of finals and therefore avoiding, unfortunately, the 3-time champs who they will have to play. It's looking like, very likely, like they'll finish third, Penrith will finish second, Melbourne will finish on top, whereas if they'd beaten Melbourne, they would have got over the hump of beating Melbourne first and foremost.
Yeah.
And then that would have closed the gap between Penrith and Melbourne and therefore give Penrith a chance to get that one spot. Because they would they will never publicly say it. The Roosters would love to play Melbourne compared to playing Penrith at Penrith.
Yeah, definitely. And so is that game definitely at Panthers Stadium? If it's Penrith v Chooks,
I think first week of finals.
Yeah, week one will be.
Yeah, first one, yeah.
Can the NRL come over the top there at all?
I think later on in the final series, I think first week they get priority. I'm pretty sure, Brooksy, right? First week of finals, they generally give it to the team, give them the home final first week of finals, and then second, third week they change it to the bigger stadiums. Is that correct?
A Panthers prelim will be at a core.
Yeah.
Because they group up the teams in Sydney to be either an Allianz team or an Accor side.
Yes.
So Penrith would play that prelim at Accor if they had it.
But week one?
Week one is local. So like Cronulla play out at
15,000 of the best last year.
That's including the Leagues Club and the Quest, I think, if you checked in there.
That's huge for Penrith, obviously, getting that. I mean, it's a big advantage. I know it's only, an hour or a bit in the car, but that's such a big advantage for them to play
big time,
the Roosters there in week one. Now, we are, fair enough, we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves, but that's the most likely scenario.
It is very, and mate, it's I grew up in Penrith, and I played all my junior grand finals at Penrith, and then I went away, obviously never played for them in the first grade. It's disgusting to go out and play at Penrith, and this is even when they weren't even that good. They weren't even as dominant during my period. It's just a really tough place to play. The grass is a little bit heavier out there.
Penrith supporters 1300 01 1170. Have you say for the Scopes comments there? I had nothing to do with that one. I love going out to Penrith. It's a great part of the world.
No, to play. Yeah, I love going out to Penrith. They've got it's ever growing out there.
Yeah.
Shawnee, chuck on the boots, chuck on a jersey, go play out there against the Penrith Panthers. It's colder. It's if it's hotter, it's 3 to 4 degrees hotter. If it's a summer's day, if it's the middle winter, it just feels that it's nowhere near. It's not a Canberra or a Melbourne, but it's probably the next worst.
Yeah.
And they always had physical teams. Like whenever I played out there against Penrith team, they always just had big boppers, and they've just got better and better, and they've built a stronger culture. So a really big advantage for Penrith playing at Penrith first week of finals. Yeah, whoever they end up playing, it should be the Roosters.
So we mentioned the Chooks injuries. We might have a little listen to Robbo, what he had to say after it. But obviously we touched on Dom Young injury. He limped off early. It was early in the second half, so I got that one wrong. You're right. Manu just doesn't look completely right. And Lindsay Collins and Nat Butcher sustained injuries as well. So we'll hear from Robbo about those.
Lindsay was quite good in there. He was just getting stitched up. We had to wait till after the game, but he was clear. Sometimes they get a bit cloudy for a long period of time, but he looked quite good. Dom, he did a hammy, a slight twinge, so it wasn't much. He still sprinted post that, but it was enough in his position, to get him off. So it's not a long termer, but it's also it's annoying that it's happened again.
Nat Butcher?
Nat. Pop rib cartilage, which... That's great. I saw him holding. I wasn't sure what it was. I thought it was his wrist, but rib cartilage. So
rib cartilage. That's the one that's supposed to be one of the most painful.
Yeah, because you got to play with it.
Have you done one?
Yeah, you got to be able to pop a rib cartilage. Yeah, it's awful, and it feels like you're losing your breath all the time. But players always play with it, so you've got a tough on.
Is that
you've got to play through it.
Is that a jab? Is that a needle?
Yeah, it's a jab, and they always miss, and it never works, and it wears off after 20 minutes of the game. So you've got to play the back end of the first half with it, and then they re-needle you at halftime, and then you've got to play the back end of the first half, and you walk. It feels like you can't hunch it. If anyone makes you laugh or you sneezing is way worse. I love listening. I love Robbo's.
You've broken a rib and you've done a cartilage.
Popped a rib cartilage as well. Yeah.
And what's
Sorry,
worse?
no, I've popped a rib cartilage. Okay. I haven't broken a rib.
Right.
No, I haven't. It's yuck. It's yuck, and it's not. They're not too far off. Like they're very similar. Some people miss games through it, but a lot of players will have to play on, and Yeah, Robbo, he's an entertaining listen on the presses. I like listening. I'm a big fan of Robbo as a coach, and if he's another factor in having that championship mentality. The way he is very concise with what he says after the games. He's one of those coaches that not only is talking to the media, he plays the media well. He's talking to his players at the same time. He's also sending messages to other. Inadvertently sending messages.
He's always playing chess.
Yeah, he is, mate. He is, and he's interesting to listen to. I like listening to Robbo.
All right, quick look at the Roosters' last 5 games at the bye next week. Then they've got the Eels at home, Titans away, Raiders home, Rabbitohs away. So it's a fairly easy run home if you can get that in the NRL this year. We'll keep chatting through that game from last night as well as the Warriors and Parramatta after the break. Last night from over there at Go Media Stadium, Parramatta Eels defeating the Warriors 30-20. Again, a little bit like our comments from Parramatta last week when the Storm beat them convincingly. If you were to just look at the stats from that game, we probably shouldn't be surprised if we got this scoreline here last night because they were so good stats-wise against Melbourne, couldn't put points on the board. And I was worried that might have been their last chance saloon.
Yeah, you're right.
You go over to Auckland, it's cold, your season's over. Warriors still fighting for a place in the top 8, but Warriors errors probably cost them late. How did you see the game?
Yeah, Sugar flipped me on this game, actually. I know he got in my head with the teams that are out of contention going over and travelling because I thought the start was too much. I went into this game before calling this game last night thinking 13.5, Warriors aren't that team this year. Shout out to them for selling out every game of every season at home this year. What an achievement for not only the Warriors, but New Zealand Rugby League. And if we were just talking glowingly about what's happening over there in Perth at the moment, there is a real opportunity to grow the game in New Zealand right now. So considering what the Warriors have been through this year to sell out. So, again, shout out to New Zealand. Well-deserved from Parramatta and well-deserved from a couple of leaders in their team that have been under the pump in the last couple of weeks. Regan Campbell-Gillard and Clint Gutherson, they have been really good for about a month now. And they probably haven't got given the credit because the games fell away from them or they've dropped off. The King was wearing his crown last night, and it was a crazy start. We talked about it. I caught it with Jimmy Smith and Timmy Manor last night. They hadn't been there since 2017 or 18, Parramatta. Wow. Hadn't been in New Zealand. So Dylan Brown had never played in New Zealand as a Parramatta Eel. That's crazy, right?
That is crazy, yeah. Really tough place to go, as I said. And you'd think they're now safe from, you don't win a wooden spoon, do you? What do you call it? From getting the wooden spoon delivered to your club at the end of the year. You think they're safe now, obviously, with the West Tigers going down. Parramatta get the all-important 2 points, but they're a really funny team. Jason Ryles coming in next year. How do you see him going first up? Because they've had a lot go against them this year. I mean, their best and most important player is, I think he's only played 4 or 5 games for him for the whole year, Mitchell Moses, obviously.
Yep.
Get a fit and fire and Moses back. We've seen in the last 2 weeks they can put performances together. Not, always winning games, but the effort and performance is still there, which is probably all you can ask for a team sitting second last and ladder. Do you see them? Is it a big bounce back next year?
They're capable of it for sure. They've still got the roster. It's an aging roster. They are in a little mini window with Jason Ryles, and I think a big. Well, considering some of the youngsters, it would have been a bittersweet feeling watching Parramatta Eels fans watching Blaze Talangi cross over at the start of the second half, which sort of, all but wrote the end for the Warriors in the game, and therefore a really good backs against the wall victory for Parramatta Eels. But they are so top heavy with their contracts, and they have the worst clauses. I don't know how or why this got done from Parramatta with the amount of clauses that all their top tier players have got. Because what that does is
give us some insight into what they are. And how does that get negotiated?
Well, I'm not too sure who is. You would have thought that Brad Arthur would have had a lot to do with the negotiation period with some of these players because he had such a really good relationship with them. And in a way, it's it could have been one of those things like you're Brad Arthur, you got a good relationship with him. it's the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
if,
true.
You know, if you're thinking it like that, like if something was to go wrong,
If he knew the writing was potentially starting to be written on the wall.
and there have been rumours about unrest between him and the
God,
front office for years.
yeah.
For years. So it might have been a bit of Brad Arthur magic there.
And what are those clauses? Is it
Just player options,
player
basically, all the
Yeah.
way through. So I think Dylan Edwards was signed, someone will probably correct us, but close to Brooksy, I think up to 2030, but he can hit the market as early as maybe the end of next year if he deems. And the problem with that is they have had some young talent come through, like Blaze Talangi, and understanding letting Matt Arthur go with compassionate ground shooter what happened to his dad Brad, and Ethan Sanders, he's heading down to Canberra Raiders with Ricky to team up with the other Ethan, looks like Strange, under the tutelage of Jamal Fogarty. So you've got these older players which are a great core product or a great core group to have for Parramatta Eels, but they've got all this uncertainty around all their contract situations.
So Dylan Brown, 8-year deal he signed till the end of 2031, 2 seasons where he has a player option, 26 and 28. So by round 10 next year, similar to Fafita's scenario, he has the right to sort of flag whether he wants to kick on and utilise that clause and become a free agent. So, and that'll be the same in 2027 for 2028. So we've still got 2 scenarios, boys, in 2025 and 2027 where Brown can sort of opt in or out on that deal.
That
Yeah,
makes
huge.
managing the cap as well so hard in those periods of time going forward, not knowing whether a player like Brown is obviously going to be taking up a huge chunk or not when the decision's in his court as well.
Well, what makes it really tough, you're right, because you've got to make decisions on potential on players like Blaze Talangi, which they haven't been able. Like they would have had a number in there which they would have offered to him. But I imagine it's got to be not unders, but it wouldn't match for what a lot of people would think his potential could be. Now, he might not live up to that, right? And,
could be a good call in.
It could.
3 years' time.
Who
We'll never
knows?
know,
We'll see. We'll see because he hasn't completely proved it, but he has looked good. He has. Don't get me wrong. He has looked like a real talent. But with all the uncertainty around the contracts and if players may move on, if I'm Jason Riles, there's no way the players do it, and there's no way the managers do it. If I'm Jason Riles, I'd offer 50, maybe even north of that to 100,000 extra to some of these players to lock them in. I know that they're all on big money as it is, and get rid of the clauses, but it's not going to happen. And that's what Jason Riles has to manage now moving forward for the Parramatta Eels.
Pretty keen to hear from some Para fans, actually. Text in 0457 736 736. I know we're only in August of 2024, but looking to next year, it's obviously big changes, new coach, some players on the way out. Not too many players on the way in, but you're going to get a Zach Lomax. Like, what's the feeling at Parramatta Eels fans level on how they're going to go next year? Quickly on the WARS scope, I feel like I said errors hurt them late. It wasn't they were making errors late in the game. Early in the first half, they were making really poor errors when they were hard on in attack. Could have been a different story early, but they were their own worst enemy last night. What's going wrong for the WARS this year?
Yeah, when I was watching the game last night, the one thing that worked well for them, and they sort of changed the culture where they were very unpredictable. They relied a lot. Pacific Islander influence in New Zealand has always been offload footy, ad-lib footy, and Sean Johnson was known for that as well. He completely sort of changed his game over the last couple of years. Now he's very predictable. You can see the sort of shape that they worked really well last year, playing a very specific shape. It was, get to the left-hand side of the field, get to the post, run a block play with a big middle, or sometimes Tohu Harris would run and do the middle forwards and throw it out the back to Sean Johnson, and he would either have a block play or a doubles play, which is the back rower and the centre running through.
The doubles play was their absolute pet play.
They were killing it with that play last year. And they've gone to that a number of times, and they always try to work for that. Therefore, I thought the Parramatta Eels, got to give credit to the Parramatta Eels. They defended really well last night. But most teams have handled that well all year, and therefore it's led to a little bit of frustration amongst the team, a lot of frustration with, Shawnee. You can see it's evident with body language. And then there's all question marks around the spine, and is it working? And the question marks about, Chance Nickel-Clogstad at fullback and not putting Roger there. They had none of those issues last year.
Yeah.
It was just flowing, and now I think they need to find a plan B. I think they need a big because they're done this year. They're well and truly done, the Warriors. They need to tweak their offense ever so slightly next year because you can tell they're always trying to work to that right side to pull off that shape, and it just hasn't been working for them this year.
Speaking of tweaking, there was accusations of a squirrel grip last night, Scope. So our man DWZ, who was on the show last week, got to give a shout out to not only his watch company, but he's bringing out some sort of hair care range as well.
Yeah.
So just keep your eyes peeled for that. Best hair in rugby league by an absolute country mile. But there was an accusation, and I don't think we've heard any more since Brooksy, but it was on Joe Offengawi on the ground. It didn't look like I've deep dived on this play.
Okay.
Didn't look like the traditional squirrel grip as we know it, which is generally sort of between the legs.
A little bit of Will Chambers, Sam Burgess,
a little bit of Will Chambers, but this seemed to be Joe. Sort of, it was a tackle around the hips, and his hands have sort of gone to areas that you might not want to go. Generally, I'm not sure it was deliberate, but there might have been a little tweak somewhere that caught Dallin off guard. But I don't think he made an official complaint on field, although it was.
He did on the field.
It did he?
Yeah,
that's right, because it was put on report, wasn't
it? Reluctantly. I would say he did it reluctantly.
Yeah.
And during my time, I've grazed it a few times. You've grazed the private parts a couple of times, and it's just natural, especially when you're grabbing. So there's a part in which I think
you're
grabbing, grazing, whatever description you want for it. There is a world where you can graze or grab, and I think it was accidental. It didn't look like there was much in it from Big Joe.
I don't know about that. I got some exclusive audio, and this is what I heard from the field.
Get your hand off my penis! This is the bloke who got me on the penis before.
Oh, Brooksy,
you're on fire. Brooksy.
You can go home now. You're not going to top that. That was absolutely
That's
perfect.
as good as it gets for a Saturday morning.
I wonder if he celebrated after that with a succulent Chinese meal. Who knows? So it was the game. The game had it all. We talked about Gutho, probably one of his best games of the year. Did you see him when he dropped that ball? He let a big. I'm not sure if he knew the camera was right in his face or right on him, but he let off a big.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know if that was directed at himself or Todd Smith, who is in communication with all night again, as he always is.
Probably a little bit of both, I reckon, from Gutho. All right, quick break. Back with more Mowers Club.